If you don't already play Dungeons & Dragons, when you hear it, you probably picture some kids in their parents' basement, a la Stranger Things.
We're deep shit.
Will, you're actually
Or maybe you picture a group of 30-ish-year-old dudes, like neckbeardy type, also in their parents' basement.
In any case, here are my top 5 reasons everyone should be playing Dungeons & Dragons.
A little list for you. I thought to myself, you know what there's not much of on the internet is list videos. Yeah, so the number one reason I think to play Dungeons & Dragons is the escapism.
You got books, you got movies, you got TV, you got video games. All great ways to escape the mediocrity of your boring life. But,
do you remember playing pretend as a little kid? I think I will forever be chasing the high that was playing pretend. It was the ultimate form of escapism.
Me and my childhood best friend Seth would come up with these insane stories. We came up with a freaking sick version of Ready Player One and the 2009 Gerard Butler movie Gamer before either of those things ever existed.
They call it a game.
Slayers gives the gamer full control of a human being in full-scale combat.
But the players are real.
They owe me money. They actually owe me money. But let me tell you, the closest I have ever felt to when Seth and I were in season 7 of some epic sci-fi journey, mowing down enemies, screaming over lost loved ones, was years and years later, when I got introduced to, you guessed it, Dungeons & Dragons by some friends.
Creating a character, or if you're the DM, a whole world, and then getting to interact with that world with your friends is just so freeing and nostalgia-inducing. Whatever you can't do or can't have in the real world, that's probably not a limit your fantasy character has. So the sky's the limit. You can get so attached to the characters in the game that it can really become another level of immersion. It feels a lot more personal because you have created a big portion of it. It's not something you get at the same level from video games, and certainly not from like movies or books. You know, those things are great. They're very like specially curated, and in some video games you can have like a ton of control, but Dungeons & Dragons, baby, it takes it to another level. Give her a go.
If you're looking to be creative, but you don't know quite where to start,
or maybe you know exactly where to start, but there's just some sort of mental block keeping you from pursuing that creative goal,
the doctor orders a healthy dose of slaying dragons and looting treasures with your friends.
You know, we talk about in the last reason how part of the connectivity and the escapism of it all is the aspect of creation. And I think if you're looking for an avenue to explore creatively, this is a great one. You only have to listen to some Dungeons & Dragons podcasts to kind of get an understanding of how creative it can get.
You guys want to make some bacon? He pulls a mask over his face, pulls a lit Molotov cocktail out of his mailbag, and boom, hits the lock, opens the jail cell. You see the halflings with like black ski masks rappel in.
I've always found it really cool whenever I hear that a creative of some sort plays Dungeons & Dragons. I feel like it just makes a lot of sense. There's this bit of acting and improvisation that happens, this bit of writing, this bit of, role play or acting that happens. Not that you need to be any of those things to play Dungeons & Dragons, but I feel like there is a connection there. And if you start basic, you might just eventually find yourself sucked in, writing pages upon pages of character backstory, drawing maps, and painting figurines. Which does lead me to my next point. Reason number 3, this hobby can go deep.
You can play Dungeons & Dragons without getting very deep. Download the D&D starter book, get some dice, get some friends. That might be the hardest part. And jump into Fantasyland. Start fucking around. Spend an afternoon goofing off with some pals. Or you can get really deep. You can buy 100 Dungeons & Dragons books. You can listen to a bunch of great Dungeons & Dragons podcasts and watch Dungeons & Dragons shows.
I am Dungeon Master, your guide in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons.
This hobby goes on and on and on. And I'm really only touching on classic fantasy D&D. There are a million versions you can play. You can play a Blade Runner version. You could do a Simpsons version. You could be a little mouse running away from cats. There's a great D&D podcast where everybody plays as toy figurines. There's a simpler version of Dungeons & Dragons where, what's the bear one? You're a bear looking for honey? Honey Heist. There's a great simpler role-playing game called Honey Heist where you play as bears trying to get honey. The possibilities are endless. You know, some people play Dungeons & Dragons like a single game of Dungeons & Dragons for years and years and years, and they're building like Tolkien-esque universes, you know, fucking Game of Thrones sized worlds with their buddies, and I think that's very cool.
Reason number 4, it has mood-boosting qualities. Now, I don't know if there's any science behind this, but I always found it to be true. You know, I would go into these really depressive episodes a few years back, and sometimes I would cancel Dungeons & Dragons with my roommates and his friends. I mean, actually fairly often I would do this. My roommate would try to convince me that if I played, I might actually feel a little bit better. Now, I rarely listened to him, but every time I did, I think it was true. I did get a little tick up, and it's like, oh, no shit. I hung out with some friends and chatted and laughed and messed around. But at that time, very little was getting me out of those depressive episodes. And I feel like Dungeons & Dragons was one of the very few things that actually helped.
If what you've been doing recently isn't hitting the spot, if it's getting stale, if it isn't working, and you haven't played Dungeons & Dragons, the video, you get my point. To wrap things up, I just want to talk about how Dungeons & Dragons is made for everyone. Life can make you feel like an outsider, like you don't belong. If you can create a space with some friends where you do belong, a crew of pirates or adventurers or a league of assassins, and you can escape to this world with some pals, and you can have a little bit more control over the world that you inhabit, it is really great. And it can make you feel like you belong in a way that sometimes the world doesn't. We talk a lot about a lack of third spaces, and that's true. And Dungeons & Dragons isn't necessarily a great alternative. That might be a whole nother video, but game rooms, I feel like could be a great alternative to like bars and parks and libraries as a way to meet and hang out. There can be some odd people there for sure, but I feel like, they just need some deodorant and love. Okay, yeah, it's made for everyone. It's made for the nerds. It's made for hot people. It's made for fucking people playing it in Madison Square Garden, or people playing it that can't afford any of the books or mini figurines or cool maps, so they're just doing it with paper pencil and their imaginations.
I am ready.
I'm also kind of making this video to get myself to play Dungeons & Dragons, because as much as I like it, and as much as I like talking about it, I actually haven't played in quite a while. I've played Baldur's Gate, I've played the video game, I saw the movie when that came out, but it's tough to get a game going. Maybe if I make this video, get some other people to make that jump, text message, or call some friends, and set up a game of Dungeons and Dragons. Let me know if I've convinced you. Okay. Catch you later.
I should make the noise with my mouth, shouldn't I?